Welcome back to another video, guys. In today's video, we're going to talk about the French defense and the Caro-Kann defense. We're going to go through the differences between these two openings for black against 1e4, the pros and cons of each one, and we're going to help you to try and make a decision whether you are more like a French defense player or a Caro-Kann player. But before we move on to the video, I'd like to recommend you to subscribe to the channel if you are not yet subscribed. I post videos pretty much every day here, giving tips about chess improvement in general, tactics, openings, and much more. So please subscribe to the channel. Now let's talk about the two defenses, the two openings, the French defense and the Caro-Kann. They have a lot of things in common and a lot of differences as well, but they have more things in common than you guys think. So they are both defenses for black against the first move, 1e4, pawn to e4. So they are both going to be openings that we play against this first move from white. So both the French and the Caro-Kann are defenses that we use to contest white's center. Let's imagine that white can make two moves in a row. So if they could make two moves on the first move, they would probably put two pawns on the center of the board. They would play e4 and d4. That's the dream of every chess player, right? To play two moves in a row. So if they could do that, they would probably play pawn to e4 and pawn to d4 to have a very strong center, and then later on develop some pieces and castle. So we know that the intention from white is to play after e4, is to push d4, and if you don't do anything to stop this move, they are probably going to play d4. This is going to be their second move for sure. So one thing you can do to stop that, or to at least discourage that move d4, is to play e5. So in this case, you are just going to discourage this move, because if they play d4, you're just going to take that pawn. You can take that pawn. And the same goes for the Sicilian defense when you play c5. And this is discouraging this move here because now your pawn is controlling this square. So if your opponent pushes, you can just take it. Of course, you're not stopping them from playing that move. You're just discouraging them. They might play that move anyways. But the Caro-Kann and the French are not going to do that. They are going to contest white center later. So we're going to play a preparation move to set up for the push of d5. So we want to contest this central pawn, the e4 pawn. Okay, so we're not going to look at this move d4. We're going to look at this move e4, and we're going to try to break white center by pushing d5. But we don't want to push d5 right away, because if we push it, well, if white takes, we can take back with the queen. This is a proper opening, actually, not a big deal with that. It's the Scandinavian. It is a proper opening, so you take back with the queen, but then white might go for this move, knight to c3, and then they are suddenly attacking your queen, and you have to move this queen again. They are developing with tempo, and we don't want to do that, right? So in this case, what we're going to do here is we're going to contest this move e4 by preparing it. So we're going to prepare d5. The French defense does that by playing e6. And by playing e6, you're preparing this push and contesting the e4 pawn. So your opponent probably going to play d4. They might play other moves, of course. And then you push d5. And now you are attacking this pawn. And if white doesn't do anything about it, you can go ahead and take it. You are actually threatening to take it because this pawn is not defended. So they might do something about this. And they have like three options. They have more options, of course, but the three most common options to do something about this pawn is to take first before you capture them. They capture you. And of course, you played e6 for a reason. You played it to prepare this move. So if they take your pawn, you can take back, and then you're going to have like two pawns in the center of the board. But your opponent can also advance this pawn. This is one way to protect it, right? So you're just advancing the pawn, and now you're not attacking anything, okay? But you disturbed white center in a certain way. And they can do something like knight here or knight here to defend this pawn. And then maybe you can take it, or maybe you can leave it as it is. there are many options for that. And the same thing happens if you play the Caro-Kann. The difference is you're not playing e6 to prepare this advancement, you are playing c6. So that's the difference. Instead of playing e6 to prepare d5, you're playing c6. Your opponent is probably going to keep with their plan of taking the center of the board, and you are going to strike with 5. And now you are attacking this pawn on 4. And they have to do something about it. And they have pretty similar options from the French defense, right? So they can go ahead and take you first, because you are threatening to take them, right? So they can go ahead and take you first, and then you can take back, because that's why you played this move in the first place, right? You played c6, so whether, you know, if they take your pawn, you can take back. So if they take, you can just take back. This is one option. This is the exchange variation. For the French and Caro-Kann, you have exchange variations. Or they can just push the pawn forward on the board, and this is the advanced variation. And we have the advanced variation for the French defense and for the Caro-Kann as well. So your opponent can just go ahead and push this pawn. And they can also play a move like this one or this one maybe to try and hold on to this pawn. This is totally possible. Okay, there are other moves, but these are the most common ones. They can just play this to defend the pawn. This is the fantasy variation, if I'm not mistaken. Put in the comments down below if I got it right or not. I believe this is fantasy variation. But there are many other variations you can play. But the most common ones are these 3 big variations, which is exchange, advance, or maybe some other classical variation trying to defend the pawn. Okay, same goes for the French defense. You have exchange, you have advanced variation, and you also have some other variations where you develop the knight or a bishop to try to hold on to the pawn. Okay, very good. These things are the similarities that they have. So they are both defenses for black against 1e4. You let white take the center, and then you strike with d5, and maybe you can capture back later on. All right, this is the similarities, but there are some differences as well. So if we go back to the first move, e4, we have to know that when we push this pawn to e6, and then later on d5, we are going to be blocking this light squared bishop with our pawn chain. And this is going to make it hard for this light squared bishop to develop in the future. We're going to have this file open if white takes. We're going to have the central file open. In the Caro-Kann, we're going to have the C file open. And most of the times we will have that. So the French defense, more often than not, will lead to more closed positions. They might lead to some open positions too, but usually it leads to closed positions, where you have to maneuver your pieces, and sometimes you have less space, especially in the advanced variation. I am a French defense player myself, and I really like playing it, but I'm comfortable just playing in those kinds of positions. And when you play c6, when you play the Caro-Kann, you're more likely to have open positions, and you're going to have probably this open file to put maybe your rook and try to attack on the queen side as well. So you're going to have more open positions, and you're not going to have this problem of the light squared bishop being blocked. So you're going to push here and here, and your light squared bishop will be free to develop. So you're not going to have this pawn here on e6 blocking it. And this bishop is also free because, you know, pawns will not be on its way more often than not. Okay, so this happens a lot, especially on the French advanced variation. So if we go to the position of the French defense, and this is one of the most common variations of the French, you lose a lot of space because white has this very strong center, and it's very forward on the board, on your side of the board. And this pawn is taking away some key squares for development here, so you cannot put your knight here. This is a little annoying. Of course, you have some other options to develop it in other ways, maybe here and here, or you can just let it here and develop it later on game. So sometimes we're going to just try to attack this pawn right here and try to break white's center. So more often than not, black's going to play moves like pawn here to attack this pawn. Maybe the knight's going to come here, and later this knight's going to join attacking here as well. We might bring the queen over here to also put pressure on this pawn, and we're going to try and break this center later in the game. Whereas the exchange variation is much easier to play, because when white takes this pawn and you take back, suddenly your bishop is free, right? So you have the problem of the French defense, which is this light squared bishop. It's basically solved. And this variation is very symmetrical. You have pawns on the same side of the board, have the same open file, your bishop is open. So this is very symmetrical, and that's why this variation leads to a lot of draws in the masters and grandmaster levels. But don't get this wrong, this variation can be very aggressive if you know how to play it. There are some ways to play it more aggressively. I have some videos about this on the channel, so if you want to check it out, I have some videos about the advanced variation. But for the masters and grandmasters, if they know what they're doing, this very symmetrical position leads to a lot of draws. And there are some other variations where white might play knight here, classical or Tarrasch variation. And there are many ways to play that, but I just like taking this pawn. So if they develop, let's say, the knight here, I just take the pawn. As they take back, I start to continue my development with knight here, then knight here. If they take my knight, I just capture back with my other knight. I just develop my bishop, castle very quickly. That's how I usually do. Sometimes I just fianchetto my bishop, and we are good to go because this bishop is going to be facing the pawn chain, so we might as well try to fianchetto it so it's more active on the long diagonal. Okay, so the fianchetto, like Hikaru says, is a very nice idea in the French when we're playing black. Okay. For the Caro-Kann, though, it's a little bit different. It might lead to more open games. So as you play this this move and white goes d4, you're not going to be blocking your own bishop. So this is not going to be an issue for you. So d4, d5. And if they take, you just take back and you have the C open file, and white's going to have the E semi-open file. Actually, they are semi-open files. So you can attack on this semi-open file. They might try to attack here on semi-open file center, but it's not so symmetrical, just like the French defense. So it's not as drawish. It's still drawish, but it's not as drawish as the French. So if they take here, you just take back, and suddenly you don't have such a symmetrical position because you have this open file, semi-open file, and they have this. So it's going to be a little bit unbalanced. Okay. Of course, white doesn't have to go for that. They might go for, again, advanced variation. And in this case, there are many ways to play this. You can just put your bishop out and try to close the pawn chain, like triangle formation, trying to put your bishop out first before you close it. Otherwise, you're going to have the same problems of the French defense. The bishop is going to be stuck in the inside the pawn chain. But a way that a lot of people like playing is just pushing this pawn and trying to contest the center again. And then this might lead to some more open positions because you're now threatening to take this pawn, and now white has to do something about it. Maybe they can defend it. There are some ways to play this, maybe developing the knights, trying to hold the pawn. There are some things that white can do here in this variation. They might also try to hold on to the pawn by just playing the knight here. And if they do that, you can go ahead and try to take it. They're going to take back with the knight, and you have a more open position. You're going to have this semi-open file. You can try to develop your pieces very quickly, develop your knight and your bishops. It's a more open position and leads to less draws and more attacking chances. It depends on your style. I have to say that me personally, I played the French defense and I like playing the French. Some people like to play the Caro-Kann. I suggest you to just experiment on those openings. Try them. Try the French defense a little bit, try the Caro-Kann a little bit, and see which one fits your style and suits your style the best. Then maybe you can pick and choose the one that you feel more comfortable with. In my case, I like playing the French, so it's just my own opinion here. And I'm not like a specialist in the Caro-Kann, I just know the main lines. I don't know the deep theory about it. But they are decent options against 1e4, so if you're looking for a defense against 1e4, you might try to play either the French defense or the Caro-Kann. They are such great openings. There are some other variations, of course, that are not covered in this video. It's just not possible, but you can do the research as well. So thank you very much, guys, for watching the video. I hope this video clarified and showed the differences, pros and cons of the French and the Caro-Kann, and might help you to make your decision which one to play. And if you liked the video, please Leave your like, your comment down below. And as always, I see you guys in the next one.